In the days following the killing of George Floyd at the hands of the police, I watched a major debate unfold online. On the one hand, many people saw this killing as a repeat of history. It reminded them of slave patrols, armed men keeping slaves from leaving their enslavers. But many others disagreed. This killing happened in Minnesota, they argued. Minnesota never had slavery. American school teachers teach the Civil War as pairs of opposites. The Union fought the Confederates. The North fought the South. Freedom versus slavery. Innocent versus guilty. If you went through American K-12 education, there's a good chance that you believe that the Union and the North had nothing to do with slavery, or that the North freed the slaves. But here's the problem with that. It's not true. This simplified version of history lets people from the North look down on the South. We so badly want to be the good guys that we forget that slavery was an economic institution. You didn't have to own slaves to benefit from slavery. America's economy grew in the North and the South from slavery. Free states and slave states are not opposite. They're both part of one larger system. Until we face the truth about this history, we won't be able to solve today's problems that come from this history. For several years, I have studied how money from slave states came to free states. First, I looked at deeds for land that enslavers bought in the North. Then, I studied businesses in the North that needed money from slavery for survival. Slavery fueled America's economy until 1865, even in the free North. Enslavers made money two ways. One way was by selling the things that their slaves made or grew for them. The other way was by selling the slaves. Most slaves grew their crops in the South, which had better climate and soil for farming. But the money didn't stay in the slave states. Enslavers spent money across the country. And the fact that enslavers spent the money means that people in the free North took the money. And then the North spent that money from slavery to expand their cities and towns. Cities like St. Cloud and St. Paul are by the Mississippi River. This made it easy for people from the South to just sail up and spend their money. Without that money, those cities would not have grown as they did. In the early 1800s, Americans crossed the Mississippi River and settled in the West. Native Americans were already on that land first, but our country stole their land from them and fought them for it. And then our country sold that land to people who wanted to buy it. And some of the buyers were enslavers. The moment that they bought that land, their money from slavery became part of the economy there. Some people who settled in the West saw how much money that enslavers were spending on land, and they started selling land too. Many of these people were sons of enslavers, but they did not want to own slaves like their parents did. But they asked wealthy enslavers that they knew back in the South to buy land from them. And these new Northerners wrote ads in Southern newspapers, and those ads appeared right alongside ads for sales of slaves. Some enslavers bought land in the West, but they lived full-time in the South. The business firm Choteau and Company was run by enslavers from the slave state of Missouri. At first, this company owned American Fur Company, which sold furs from the Northwest. The company later shifted to selling land in that area. This means that the people who worked for American Fur Company and Choteau and Company lived in the free West, not the South. But their salaries were directly funded by slavery. Without slavery, they would not have had jobs, even though they did not own slaves and they lived hundreds of miles away. Another way that free states benefited from the slave economy was through tourism. Southerners traveled north every summer to escape the heat, And for months each year, they spent money on room and board, food, and other items in the free North. The richest Southern visitors were enslavers, and some free cities and towns allowed them to bring one or two slaves with them for visits. After all, when the summer ended, the slaves would be going back. It was a loophole of sorts. Northerners looked the other way, willfully ignoring the horror of slavery to benefit from tourism. And after all, the free states would not have slavery year-round, so it was no big deal for them. When Minnesota Territory became a free state in 1858, its residents did not force its tourists to free the slaves they brought with them. Again, the slaves would only be around for a few weeks, and the state badly needed enslavers' money. In fact, Minnesota later tried to change into a slave state. Some of the lawmakers who voted for slavery had sold land to enslavers. They wanted to keep having Southern buyers. This is what I mean when I say that history is more complicated than what we teach in high school. Free states and slave states are not opposites. They both benefited from slavery. It's not enough for people in free states to say, we never whipped anybody. We never bought or sold anybody. We just took money from people who did. It matters that people in the free North took the money because that money made the North what it is today. That money came from sales that separated family members away from each other. That money came from whippings and other violence that kept slaves working. We are all part of this same awful history. In recent years, some communities that have roots in slavery have begun talking about those roots. Colleges in former slave states have websites about those roots. So could colleges in free states. Museums across the South have exhibits about their community's roots. So could museums in the North. You have to be willing to admit to a horror. Admitting to a horror means that you're saying that you are not separate from what America did. You are not separate from what America is. Instead, admitting to the horror makes you American. For some people, putting slavery at America's core is unpatriotic. To them, saying that America did a bad thing is saying that America is bad. This is not true. Saying that America did a bad thing is key to helping America heal. Slavery made the South sick, and it made the North sick too. The sickness shows through inequality and police brutality. Knowing how America got sick is how we help America get better. Today, all of America's legal slaves are dead, but the places they built are still here. The country they built is still here. Their work is as American as the 4th of July. They matter as much to this country as the founding fathers do. So, learn about how slaves shaped free states. Learn about how they lived and suffered. When you learn about them, you honor them. And when you honor them, you honor America. Thank you.